Good Monday morning and good Christmas morning. For those of you who are watching it in the States anyway, I hope you've had your cup of coffee and enjoyed the fire. Maybe that's where you are right now. I like to be the first one up on Christmas morning. Of course, I'm the first one up every morning, but I love Christmas morning because I love it when on the Christmas mornings where we have the kids, and I know they're all asleep and snug in their beds, the ones that are here, and it's quiet and the tree's lit, and even in the brokenness of our story, I look at that old manger scene that is passed down from my parents, and I'm just reminded of the gift of Jesus into the mess of our stories. And few stories are as messy, as painful as Joseph's, and we get to end our time together this year with this powerful revelation that rings through the ages from Adam to us. And Joseph has encountered his brothers. He sent them home and held Simeon hostage for them to bring Benjamin back. And while Joseph has been in a natural prison, his heart has been free, but Jacob has been swallowed whole by a prison of fear. So he won't let those boys go back with Benjamin until the food runs out. So there Simeon is sitting in a jail cell while Jacob and his boys are eating the rest of the food before he'll let them return. But eventually he does, because the food runs out and they take Benjamin with them. And this is the moment of the big reveal in Genesis 45, beginning with verse 1. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud so that the Egyptians heard it. It was loud. And the household of Pharaoh heard it. That's really loud. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near to me, please." And they came near, and he said, "I'm your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life." Remember, these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and they are all in one room together. And Joseph is having the revelation that this was about so much more than Joseph, as everything is in our stories. God sent me here ahead of you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there would be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. I mean, do you see what he is doing to these brothers? He is taking off all of their shame. Just like Jesus did for us. He said, "You didn't send me here. Yes, I'm bearing all the weight of your sin on the cross. And yes, I knew it when I arrived. But God sent me here to preserve your very life." That Jesus that we worship came because he loved us, and he wanted to strip away the shame of our sin and preserve our life. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house and ruler over all the land. And then he goes further still in Genesis 50. After Jacob has died, he's reunited with his father. His father blesses all of his boys before they die. Some good ones, some not so much. But you can go read that for yourselves. And then Jacob dies, and the brothers are scared all over again. They're scared Joseph's going to destroy them again. But Joseph says to them in chapter 50, verse 19 and 20, do not fear. Am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. God needed a man he could trust in that season and in that way. And yes, they meant it for evil, but God knew the man that could be trusted with the journey. And God got the boy out of Joseph so that he could become the man God created him to be. This is the end of the beginning of Genesis. Now remember, if we go all the way back to our first lesson, Genesis is the book of the beginnings and the first fruit of all scripture. And the first fruit does what? It governs the whole. So Genesis ends with this declaration that has been true from the moment God created Adam and Eve until today. The devil has meant evil for us from day one, from the beginning of time. But we need to remember, just like the beautiful song says, God doesn't have a rival. He has no equal. The enemy is not God's counterpart. The enemy is a defeated foe in our story. The end of his story has already been written. And he's defeated. So this principle that what you meant for evil, God meant for good, governs the whole of our stories. It doesn't matter what the enemy throws at us. When we are God's, he is able to work all of it for good in our stories. And now I want you to sit with this as we leave this year together. Do you realize that all that Joseph walked through in those 22 years of heartbreaking pain were brought about the salvation of the very people who started his painful journey? That God used him to save the people who brought him and meant the most evil and harm for his story. Friends, our stories are always about something so much bigger than you and I. And yet the enemy loves to get us just locked into this little self-pity, self-centered perspective. But God is working something so much bigger. Joseph was used for their redemption, just like God's love used Jesus for ours. Oh, the love of God. Oh, the beginning of our story. Merry Christmas.